Welcome back to Arise Prime Time. I'm Charles Enyegolu, and this wouldn't be Arise Prime Time without the presence of a dedicated analyst to give us his personal perspective on the news and issues we've discussed today on the program, as well as the other stories that are of interest to our audience. So for the rest of the program, we're joined by the political affairs commentator, Arise News analyst, and lecturer at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Good evening, Charles. Thanks for having me.
And I'm sure you heard Professor Kingsley Marlo talking about inflation. He was, of course, the former deputy governor of the central bank. So to some extent, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And his central point was that it is concerning inflation, but it's also concerning the way that it's being tackled. Because although the textbook recommendation is to raise interest rates in order to keep inflation down, because Nigeria's economy is so convoluted and twisted, that textbook recommendation may not necessarily work here, because you've got like sedimented economic problems that go back centuries. What do you reckon?
Well, I heard him very clearly, and of course, typically he was very exhaustive, as an expert in the field. I heard him spoke about cost-push inflation, spoke about structural inflation, and as well. But of course, if you add that to the basic understanding that we have about causes of inflation, it relates directly or indirectly to the fact that it's called when demand is higher than supply, of course, price of goods and services will go up. And that's the situation we have in our country at the moment, where there's no production, our consumption is largely foreign. And of course, manufacturing is not there. The agricultural sector is nearly comatose because of insecurity. And again, of course, we're talking about continuous borrowing. Overall, my major deduction from your submission is that, our problem is a result of mismanagement or our inability to manage, the problem effectively.
And when you do that consistently over so many years.
And that's the underlying thing about economics, really. Economics is about holding together all the variables, even if all the variables are not, even if it is not possible to completely hold all the variables together, but as much as possible, try to put them under control. How much money are we putting into the system in a situation where there's nothing fundamental, nothing to support it, why should we continue to do deficit budget financing in a situation where production is also very weak, So the monies, the efforts we are putting is essentially artificial.
Although I have to
nothing organic.
Yes, I have to correct one thing he said. He said it was illegal for the central bank to do that. It actually isn't illegal.
It isn't illegal.
It isn't illegal.
That's fine.
There's a clause in the Nigerian law that allows the central bank to loan money or extend credit.
We know what the role of central bank is naturally,
to the federal government.
Yeah, we know what the role of the central bank is. I mean, banker to the commercial banks, banker to the government. But when deficit financing continues, ad infinitum, it becomes problematic. That's why I think the former Professor Kingsley Marlo was trying to talk about. But it's essentially about management. Imagine, yes, we have agreed that we have limited resources. There's oil theft. We're not getting revenue. NNPC is not remitting funds to the coffers, as the case could be. Yes, these are facts, but what is the remedy? What are we doing about cutting wastages? What are we doing about leakages?
That's a very good
point.
What
are we doing to ensure accountability, to ensure transparency? How well are we managing the resources that we have, other than resort to borrowing? And when we borrow, where does it go into? Consumption, recurrent expenditure. And of course, do not forget, there's also the danger of these funds, again, going back to the cycle, to the value chain of corruption, being hidden, plundered, and taken elsewhere, rather than being kept in the system, whether rightly or wrongly, maybe to cause some reflation, as the case could be, to trigger some production, some activity in the system, so they can bring about increased multipliers and, of course, rubbing off on the GDP, as the case could be. So overall, you see a problematic management system. In the past, we have had some managers of our economy talking about, I think, envelope budgeting. We have seen such terms in the past. We've also had such terms like economic lab or something like that. I've had something like that. But in recent times, we've not had any of these philosophy, and that's what the, Professor Mogali was also talking about again. Ideology is very important. Philosophy is very important. Because philosophy is like a policy direction that will shape our activities, our spending pattern, our expenditure pattern, and our consumption pattern. But now we're not seeing any change, really, unfortunately. But that's not to say that some gains have not been made in terms of infrastructure. But we have seen it around the cities. We have seen it around the places, irrespective of the threats of bandits and all of that. But the improvement in those areas, is meant to trigger economic activities. But again, that economic activity that you expect improved infrastructure to trigger, may not be possible, if other variables are not adding up. In
insecurity, this, that, and all the rest of it. I mean, so do you see any hope on the horizon? I mean, there's an election coming up. There's a more aware electorate who want to hold the feet of the candidates to the fire and to make sure that they're focused on the issues. Does that make you more hopeful that perhaps that philosophy that Kingsley Marlo said was absent and you agreed with may now start to evolve?
Yeah, it could evolve, Charles. Economy, like I said yesterday or some times ago, is an intangible. It's about engendering confidence in a system.
Absolutely.
It's about social capital. And if I trust you enough, I can give you my money to invest for me or to keep for me. But if I don't trust you, of course, I'll take away my capital. And of course, money ordinarily flies away from where there's crisis, when there's a lack of confidence. So if we have a new set of leaders or going into the campaign, if our leaders are able to assure us, if they're able to engender that confidence, of course, we might see, investment coming in, people being able to invest more. And when there's investment, what happens, it could cause some reflection. And of course, then the real sector can witness some level of boost. And maybe overall, it could reduce some of these problems we're talking about, particularly the increasing inflation. I even want to suspect that the inflation that is presently put at about 22% or something like that
is higher than that.
It may be higher than that, really, because there's statistics can just simply be reflective. They just estimate, but somehow if you look at it in practical terms, how much it cost you to buy some commodities some few years ago and how much it's costing you now, it could be higher. But it's not to say that we cannot do something about it. But overall, it's about management, it's about philosophy, ideology, and not just mounting the ideology, but ensuring that you walk your way towards the actualization of this ideology.
We've got 2 minutes before we have to go. Very good analysis there. But I do want you to touch on this issue of hair, black hair. We're talking with that young lady, Adeniyi, former Enwezo, who is the founder of the African Hair Summit and the Afro Hair Culture Festival. And she worked with the woman, Michelle de Leon, who started World Afro Day 5 years ago. You agree with her that it is needed and that it is necessary to have a day dedicated to Afro hair?
Absolutely, Charles. I agree with her. It's about cultural reawakening, and it's a way for us to start.
Even though you don't have any hair yourself,
it's a way to begin to think about decolonizing our mind. Decolonization is not just physical; it's also
the key, isn't it?
Yeah, it's also psychological.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have seen some of our ladies, even taking tablets because they want to change the color of their skin.
Absolutely.
We know what the role of importing human hair from Latin American countries. We know how it's affecting our economy, rightly or wrongly as well.
Absolutely.
So all this endless importation is causing, creating pressure on forex as well.
Absolutely.
But if we look inward, feel good about ourselves, free our mind, be proud of our identity as a people, of our color, of course, it will go a long way in helping us in many respects. So it's a mind thing, really. And of course, maybe we shouldn't blame ourselves too much. It's a product of long years of slavery, long years of colonialism, and the continuing.
But we have to get to a point of awareness.
Which is all okay. And that's about changing the narrative. Yeah. So it's just a process of decolonizing the mind. And of course, they deserve commendation, for taking
the work that they're doing.
on this endeavor. Yeah.
And you deserve commendation for your sterling analysis, as
Charles,
always.
thank you very much.
Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is the political affairs commentator, Arise News analyst, and lecturer at Bayes University. Thank you, Prof.
My pleasure, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again next week. From me and the entire team here in Abuja and around the world, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.